Started.
Okay. Oh, and Paige is going to record it just because people always ask. So thank you, Paige. We are now officially recorded. So can people see the handout on the screen?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So basically, I got to see the handout on the screen. And that chat room is taking up some space. So for today's topic, it's the board's leadership role across the organization when it comes to inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. And these are the classic board duties, first established by the Washington, D.C. Center on Nonprofit Organizations, which is now called Board Source. And the fact is, when you're talking about the basic board duties of ensuring legal and ethical integrity, building a competent board has a lot to do with making sure folks are included from all walks of life. And that will then help the organization to better determine its mission and purpose, ensuring effective planning and monitoring. So it all goes together. Diverse groups make better decisions when you come right down to it. Science proves it. So the whole idea of protecting assets and providing financial oversight. And when it comes right down to it, fundraising, the financial resources. It's a big world out there, and it takes a lot of people from a lot of places to help the organization's finances thrive. And of course, if you have people who are throughout the organization who can really help to understand what's going on in the public and be ambassadors back and forth, the board's duty to enhance the organization's public standing becomes an easier job when you have communications back and forth. And then the seventh board duty is selecting, supporting, and evaluating the CEO. And again, you need a lot of perspectives to do this. So it's not just about building a competent board when you look at inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. It's about really diversifying across the entire nonprofit. That is the board's duty, to make sure it's across the entire nonprofit, program, services, board, staff, volunteers, everything. So let's talk about where we can start. So today, you know, a lot of times when people come to us, especially I think you hears a lot with Get on Board, it's how do we find people who look different than what we currently have on our board? And then we then start to get in conversations about, well, we're trying to find people, but they're, you know, we're kind of, things aren't quite working the way we thought. And wait a second, people aren't staying, or we're not finding the right people. And then we kind of take a look at, wait a second, there's just something going on in our organizations, so that we're really, if there are impediments to bringing different people throughout the organization to the organization. And finally, we get to the core. It starts with self-reflection. When you get right down to it, they say that if a board wants to diversify across the organization, you really need to start with the core. You really have to say, are the board members truly, truly, authentically committed to diversity throughout the entire nonprofit, not just plopping a few folks on board. So that means taking a look at programs and services overall, what messages and what graphics we have when we're marketing and fundraising, and what processes, who we get our things from, who we partner with, and who really helps roll up their sleeves to get the work done. And so when you get right down to it, it's got to start with the self-reflection. And too many times it just starts with going after some folks, I find. Timmy, you want to add to that, or does anybody want to add to that?
Sure, Ken, I'll throw a couple of things in. I'm going to give you an analogy, and the analogy I'm going to share with you is about networking. And I've shared this with a couple of folks before, and I call it the closed circle of networking. And if you think about this, first of all, think about the diversity of all of you today on this call and the boards that you're involved in. I mean, it's a wide range of what we have represented today. When you think about yourself and your team going to an event to network, all too often we stay in our comfort zones, and our comfort zone typically is around the people that we know the best. And if you're networking, those aren't the people you need to get to know. You need to get to know people who you don't know. And so I call it the closed circle of networking. And I want to draw a picture for you real quick here. If you go to an event and you're looking for someone to talk with, and everyone is engaged in the conversation, and there's no way for you to enter that conversation. So they're in this circle and you can't enter that circle, then you're less likely to approach that group because they're closed off to you. Whereas if that circle is open, if there's a gap in that circle for you to step into, then you're more likely to have that conversation. This is the same thing. We're saying that as you start looking for people to diversify your boards, spread your horizons, open that circle so you entertain folks that you may not have looked at before, but actively seek those folks out and welcome them into your group.
So let's talk a little bit more in depth about how to do that and what we find. And again, this is a good place to start in your governance and nominating committee, but then it really does expand throughout the organization. I think a lot of times in a governance and nominating committee, I mean, it's been a lot for folks just not to say, hey, we need somebody on board, let's grab them, they're interested. And so we've been working for years to try to get governance committees to take a look, and this is just an example of, you know, what kinds of people are we looking for our boards? We'll start with that issue. And to get some sense of what expertise you need on board, whether you have it, whether you need it, the finance fundraising connection, there may be geographical considerations, age considerations. In a sense, those are the easier things. And then we start to get into some of the harder things. Sometimes we walk in and boards are mostly men or mostly women, and sometimes that is intentional and sometimes that's not. And then orientation and gender identity, religion, disability, race, ethnicity, these are the things that start to get harder because some of them are unseen and some of them are just kind of taboos when you get right down to it. So it's hard to bring it out. But so really it goes back to having authentic discussions about what you really already have and truly what you're looking for. And it's interesting that Timmy mentioned, you know, the whole thing about an openness when you're in conversations and networking versus a closed circle of people. The other thing I have is the box. What I found too many times as we're working with governance committees is, again, you box yourself in to the people you already are familiar with and you already know. And then we sit there and question why we can't diversify our boards so readily. And it comes back to, and this is kind of, you know, this was sort of my aha with Timmy a couple years ago. If we're always going to reach out to the people we know and we're comfortable with, then we're always going to get the people we know and we're comfortable with on our boards. And so boards tend to invite who they already know, but you can't just grab out at somebody who is not in the circle that you know. It does take, and this is the hard part, it takes time to truly build authentic relationships and to get going on reaching out to people you don't know. And I think that boards need to have some pretty intense conversations to see if they're really ready to do that. Because as you look ahead, you have to think on here, it's not about who you know, it's about who you don't know. And it takes some time to develop that. And this is where it gets, I think, pretty interesting. Because we all know that we have to identify diverse folks. We know that you have to be careful not to just bring on one person who's different at a time. I like the rule of three myself. And we also know that there's got to be a lot of respect for non-traditional backgrounds. And so the question is really, how do board and committee members tend to intentionally seek out new experiences and get new connections and new referrals with people they don't necessarily know? And, you know, in one sense, it kind of makes sense. Oh, there's other things which I might not have gone to, that I might meet some other people that are out of my social circle. So let's start. But this actually takes some boundary spanning, and not everybody is a boundary spanner. So the other thing I put out there is that so many boards say, oh, you know, we are so inclusive. We love to welcome people to our organizations and our programs. But I have the question, are we really? And we've actually developed some tools to help you get through that. The other thing is that we really say, do not just grab somebody to join them on board, because that is like horrible. You wouldn't just walk into a restaurant, see somebody and say, will you marry me? Get them on a committee first, have a little appetizers, people. Have them do some things with the organization. To go straight on the board is what too many nonprofits do. And then really see over time, give it, several months, a couple years, it depends. Is there a really a commitment to the mission? Can that person place that nonprofit's needs ahead of their own personal needs? Does that person really know how to hold confidence as well and keep that private information private? And one that is huge is, does that person have characteristics that demonstrate that they know how to respect the group process? That people can disagree, but you still have to have respect for the disagreeing people in the committee room and in the boardroom. And can that person serve as a strong ambassador for your nonprofit? And that happens at the committee or task force level. Then there's an invitation to join the board if it's mutually agreeable. But that really takes some time. It'll take a year or two, but it's crucial. So I put that out there because we have, a survey and some ideas or places to go. But again, I wanted to entertain some conversation before we give you some specific sort of tactics. How has that been going for people? In one sense, it seems so straightforward that it takes time to build relationships. How has that been working? Has it been?
What do you see as the challenges? Oh, go ahead.
Well, no, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I think this is a blessing that I went through, that I chose this day to actually be in this, because I'm representing Oaks Ministry, but our church is going through the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's funny because we're at a place where we're trying to be intentional in our hiring practice of staff members, paid staff members, and the church leaders who are making this decision. They have been going by the same pool. They've been going to the same pool and getting the same people, and then wondering why they're not being diversified. So now the church leaders, which I'm not one of them, I'm not a church leader, but we just had a meeting, and now they're going to a different pool, and they're getting a little bit of resistance only because of the comfortability.
Right. And to be clear about that, hey, they found a different pool to go in. That's good, but it's a very different pool they're going to find, and it's not going to be easy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great point, and it's the parallel you drew of board membership versus organizations. Anytime you're trying to recruit people for any kind of position, to Darren's point, this applies, because you have to take a look at it. Who are you trying to attract? And you have to go find those people and look at your resources. And as Karen mentioned, this is not an overnight process. This is developing relationships with people that you meet. And one of the things I would suggest to every one of us, here's something that I do. Every person I meet, I say to myself, how can this person assist me, or how can I assist them to achieve their goals? Because in some cases, you may find that you need to connect someone with someone else, and it's amazing when you get in a conversation with someone, and then they ask you about, I'm looking for this type of person for my board. Do you know anybody who might fit that classification, or fit what I'm looking for, that qualification? And you'd be amazed sometimes on how you can connect people to find that right person.
Mm-hmm. What else?
I was just,
yeah, Anita.
I was going to say that one of the challenges is that, it's the responsibility of all the board members to help recruit future board members. And that's particularly important in a board where you have, term limits. So, there's always, it seems like a revolving door. And it's really important that everybody takes an active role in trying to find, who can add, a different opinion or a different background, or, a lot of different types of diversity to the board. So I think that is a challenge, at least that we experience. And you want turnover so you get the fresh ideas, but then you have to be actively looking
Turning over.
for members. Exactly. Yeah.
And most board terms are 2 or 3 years, and you can renew once, sometimes twice. So in most
Yeah,
cases,
for
I
us, it's
find
just
it about
once. Yeah.
just
Right.
once, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's what, 4 to 6 years total.
Right.
And in a lot of organizations, when you come on the board, it takes, I think, the first year to kind of figure out who's what. And I mean, and it's okay to open your mouth and have fresh ideas, but it takes at least a year to figure out the lay of the land. Even if you've been on, I mean, especially even if you've been on a committee beforehand, it's different on the governance level. Is that what people are finding?
Yeah, we got a hand raised also.
Oh, I'm not seeing that hand raised. Go right ahead. Oh, Atha.
That was me, yeah. I think from what you were saying, I'm having an aha moment. We have recruited a lot of our board members from our volunteers,
Right.
the tutors, the mentors, that sort of thing in the school district. But we've not been intentional about trying to expand our circles when we're looking for volunteers. And so I think for us, that's what we're going to have to do. You've given me an aha moment. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, and sometimes they're just little ahas. Like that was my aha moment when, we kept going to the same circles. Who's involved with us? Who comes to our events? And, and who do you know? And the aha moment for me a couple years ago with Timmy's prodding was, well, who don't you know?
Mhm.
And I mean, because you're right, at the Education Foundation, of course, you have an intact alumni group to work from. But again, it's still about relationships and easy connection. So we all go for the low hanging fruit because it gets busy. And it takes a while to develop relationships and get comfortable and have authentic relationships and be intentional about who don't you know, and to deal with that discomfort stuff and the time.
Exactly. We got Lynn has her hand raised.
Please, Len.
Yeah, what you said was extremely important about people who attend your events. So because we run up to about 600 events a year, if people apply for a board position and have never attended any of our events, they don't know what we do.
Right.
They don't understand that pay it forward philosophy.
Yeah.
And, mainly, I guess we help mainly job seekers, but we also have events for people who are employed and unemployed. But as far as a job seeker is concerned, if you don't have a job, if you don't have income, you can't give to other nonprofits and support other people in need and in the community. So it's kind of like, you have to know that you got to put the oxygen mask on, where it's needed first,
Right.
so that people have that income to, share with pets and vets and veterans and whatnot, and kids.
And there is an
Good analogy,
income
Lynn. Good
thing.
analogy.
Yeah. Chris, Chris Keller's here.
Hello, Karen. Another thing that we've seen is that people that fall into those minority classifications cycle off more quickly. Mothers, women taking care of kids, live life experiences, people that are differently abled, minorities, people of different religious affiliations or close to their religion, they want to cycle into other places that might be closer and less represented in other places. So the middle class, upper middle class white male with a partner, and the kids are grown, can stay on a board for 2 or 3 cycles. And the younger people that are just having children, people differently abled, people with lived life experiences don't have the luxury of knowing somebody's taking care of the holiday gifts or send a card to mom for her birthday or whatever those things are. And so they cycle off. So even when you're investing that time, you've got to think about what is the reality of their life circumstances for each of the board members, so that are there things we can do to support the minority voices so that they can stay on our board longer. And maybe have to encourage some of the folks that have been on 2 or 3 times, but do fall into those more stereotypical board categories, to encourage them to cycle off or take a break and come off. So that's been a balancing act that we've been struggling with.
Mhm. And it is a balancing act.
Yeah.
There's,
If you-
go
Kim.
ahead, Tim. No, go
No,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you think about it, just like with your organization, you have succession planning. You need to know who's the next person to go to a certain position. With your boards, to Chris's comment, you have to do the same thing, succession planning. And one of the things I would challenge the current board members with is that when you get ready to cycle off, who are you going to recommend to take your place? And are we looking at that chart? That chart on page 4 that Karen showed you, that's a great chart to use for a guide. It shows the different what skills you're looking for. In fact, it's up right now. That's a great chart to use. But when you talk to your board members, when they get ready as they cycle off, in fact, when they join, you should ask them, as you get ready to cycle off, think about who can take your place. And there's nothing wrong with having that conversation right up front, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen. So start that conversation right away so they start looking.
Good point. Thanks for bringing that up to me.
And thank you, Chris, for also bringing up that there's a lot of things when you're really trying to expand, even on the board level or the committee level, you have to take into account organizationally to figure out how to support and what things are supportable and what things just are beyond reach. And that's the deep discussion that has to be had to really reckon with that. The other part of this is where to find folks and how to find people. And I had a couple of resources here I wanted to talk about. One is that if you have a question as to whether or not your organization, board and staff are really ready, that whole thing about, of course, we're ready to be more welcoming, more inclusive. We do at the Community Foundation, just so you know, we have developed a DEI self-assessment for your nonprofit, for your board, your staff, your volunteers, and it's free and online. And there's a couple of the pages of it here. It takes about, I don't know, 7 minutes to fill out, 5 minutes, it depends. And it starts to get at not just people on your board or your staff, but your programs, what your overall aims are, your pipeline, and just how comfortable people are talking about different and talking about and with different parts of diversity. So if you want to, we actually did this is part of our Get On Board program for nonprofits that approach us in Hugh and say they're looking to diversify their boards. We have the boards fill out this self-assessment, the DEI self-assessment. The Community Foundation also did it for our own board. How dare we, ask other nonprofits to do it before we do it? So we sent our little link out to our board and staff and got back people's responses within 2 weeks. And then we can easily prepare a customized survey PowerPoint of the responses. And then we brought it up to the governance committee first to look at, and then we brought it up, and it was a pretty intentional, serious, I would say half-hour, 45-minute conversation at the board meeting, because it pointed out what we were doing, what we were not doing, and it really helped people to bring out some of their concerns and what more they needed. And this is a service the Community Foundation will provide to any nonprofit organization for free, because we know it's pretty darn important. So if you are with a nonprofit and you serve in a leadership position and you'd like to have us customize the link so that it has your nonprofit stuff in it even more so, we would do this at any time. And the information would be sent, the survey results would be sent to you confidentially, so that you can then work with your board. And if you needed somebody to help you have this conversation with your board, we have an idea council and we will help find somebody who would do that. So just so you know, the link is right here, and it's also on our website, and it'll be in the PowerPoint.
Yeah, Lynn, you put a great comment in the chat. You want to talk about that a little bit?
What do we have?
Yeah,
Belonging. Yeah, go ahead.
yes, I am the mother of an adult autistic child, and belonging is extremely important for the neurodivergent.
Yeah.
Also accessibility, like we run career events for people that are neurodivergent or have special needs, and also justice. I'm, all for social justice. So I kind of take the DEI BAJ approach rather than just DEI.
Yeah, yeah. You're right there. And the good news is it keeps evolving. So, yeah.
Great observation, Lynn. You know,
Thanks.
to Karen's point with the slide that she has right now too, I would suggest to all of us to take a look at this slide and then the one just before that, where it talks about today's focus, the 4 points. And to have a discussion, is that the one? It's called Today's Focus, Karen, the title. Yeah.
Oh, the today's focus.
Yeah.
You want me to go back or forward?
Just to show it, I think it's just before, go back.
That one.
That one, yes. Okay. But you know what? And our hope, of course, is that you take a look at this, but also take it back to your respective boards and your groups and talk about these things. I think with this slide and then the slide that shows your assessment, two great conversation starters for your boards to talk about. Let's have an earnest conversation about what we need to do, and then let's talk about how we're going to do it. Two great tools, I think, that you can use right off of this slide deck also to start that conversation.
There also is one more tool I'd like to offer as we think about it. Well, all kinds of tools, but here's another one that, I thought was pretty darn good. The fact is, we talked about you want to be able to keep people, and the other question, the very first one was, where do I find people? When you get through those other questions about the self-reflection and, really the impediments and the how to find folks, this is fun that the more I look at it, the better it gets. There's a woman, look at her copy of her book, somebody took it. So there's a really great little handbook that Cynthia Primo Martin in Delaware put together. And Cynthia is now retired and down in the Carolinas, but you can get her book at cedartreebooks.com. And Cynthia founded the Trustees of Color in Delaware years ago. And she was pretty darn helpful at listing places you could go to find people who don't look like you. And at first I was like, okay, so we just brainstormed. She just divided it up into these general categories. And then we brainstormed in Chester County what that might start to look like. And it was interesting to me that, the idea of talking to our committee members about putting themselves in, and in this case, you can see we were looking for more diversity on the ethnic, as far as the African American and Latino. So that's what this was targeted at, and that's where Cynthia targets. But it was interesting to get a start. And even to somebody like me, I'm like, oh my gosh, really? You just want me to walk in? You want me to join these organizations? And I'm thinking, yeah. And it's interesting because Timmy has been a good guide to say, wait a second, it's all about allies and understanding and showing up and putting in the time and the work and gaining some trust and actually doing what you say you were going to do. So it's just like any other group. And there you can brainstorm this list for your organization of where you would meet the people who you want to get to know, who you don't know already. Who do you want, not who do you know? And so Cynthia's booklet was a good listing to help get me started. Can you see this happening in your own organization? Can you see taking frameworks like this and starting to make them work for you? Doable? Not doable?
How about some challenges that some of you might want to share? I mean, and let's take a couple seconds to brainstorm a couple of things. Everybody's shy.
Hard. It is a tough one.
It is difficult. It requires some earnest conversations and again, I'll offer us as a resource. We're happy to have those conversations and try to help you brainstorm some of those things and together perhaps we can come up with some ideas.
But it's not a quick fix.
No, Darren, you
Yeah.
had a comment, didn't you? Oh no,
I'm sorry.
no, I'm sorry. I thought you had a comment. I'm just.
Oh,
No.
I always have a comment, but I was I was studying the board a little bit. All three organizations that I belong to, the civic associations, Karen brought up some excellent points, or some excellent points were discussed with the fact that when we're on a board, we should think about who's going to replace us, because in that situation, our board is, although we're taking to the initiative to expand now for so long, it's not, it's a commonplace for everybody who belongs on the board. We've been there for 30 years plus. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so now we're just, I guess we're discovering our own mortality and saying, hey, you know what? We should think about people that are going to replace us in that particular
Yeah.
situation. With Oaks Ministry, we are starting to expand. And it's a good point in the sense of who we represent should actually be represented on the board. Right
Yeah.
now, I'm the only African-American member, person of color on the board. And from us doing something like this, we're making strides to gain information. With our with church, I'm part of the Embrace Unity team, which is, of course, it's a Gateway Church, and we have over 900 members, and we're starting to get a vast majority of people of color. Yet the again, paid staff does not represent the diversity that we're going to have. So this is what we're talking about more so in church, to be more take the initiative, and the pastor doing excellent job in the sense of getting people, but he also has to remember he's not the only person, although he's pastor.
Yeah.
He has to incorporate the board and get the board on board as to why we have to do this. And some of the things that were mentioned is intentional, in the sense that by changing the pool, you're going to get people not only of diverse, but also people that are qualified. So it doesn't seem like you're trying to just get the first person of color off the street that you find just to fulfill a need. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
It
Yeah,
does.
we do.
And that's the one we've had to really take our time with. Because you want to be able to have some closure quickly, but that's not going to be healthy or sustainable. So picking the first person off the street, yeah, that doesn't really answer it for the long run.
Darren, and I gotta, this is gonna sound like a commercial when I say this, but I'll say real quick that, Hugh Bleemer's on the line right now. And Hugh coordinates our Get On Board program. And his program is designed to do just what you just mentioned, Darren. It helps you connect with the people, let them kind of test run before they become a board member. So they get involved with the organization first. So it's a great idea. Yolanda, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I did have a kind of comment and question. So if you are looking for someone who's maybe, somebody, you have to start somewhere, right? Everybody's a board member for the first time at some point in their life. But if you are maybe looking for someone, maybe somebody who's used the services of your organization, for example, and, for them, a board is like completely out there concept and they've maybe never thought of it, how do you get this person up to speed who might not have any experience whatsoever with, being on a board or never been exposed, so that they don't feel, left out or overwhelmed. you know, by being, not having any exposure ever to a board.
Yolanda,
Yolanda,
it's
You
it's a
are a
great
good
point.
commercial. You are a very good commercial, Yolanda. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point, and we always talk about retaining people on boards too. Yolanda, one of the things that I'll say, again, I'm gonna throw a commercial toward Hugh's way, with the way his Get On Board program works, but the mentoring process is very key when it comes to this. And I would submit that if people have been long-term board members, they want to see the organization stay strong and strive to move forward. Here's a great opportunity to take a seasoned, if you will, board member, and have them coach the new person, kind of walk them through the process, because it's very easy to get lost when you're getting started with the board process. But I would say finding mentors and going back to the board members and saying, part of our responsibility as board members is to ensure the sustainability of this organization. That means plan on continual growth. And so at some point in time, we're going to need you to mentor, to coach someone else, to walk them through this process so they don't get lost in this process.
And so, Yolanda, for the Get On Board program, the other part of it is that for free and online, we have our basic training workshops for potential board members to start as committee members. And then we do these monthly workshops and we do monthly roundtables. Plus we have reading resources and video resources, all for free. And then we hook up a person who's done the Get On Board program with a coach. And then, as Timmy said, once they get closer to your nonprofit and start to serve on a committee, then we want a mentor, a buddy inside the nonprofit to buddy up with them in addition to our coach. And the first thing is to make sure that there's committee space, or and that you're not just working as a board as a whole. Because if you're not breaking up into committees to do committee work, then you're always working as a board as a whole, and you're not inviting non-board members to the table, for one, to help, and for two, as a testing ground for whether they should be on the board. And so that would be the other thing. And I don't know the circumstances of what you got, but sometimes there's just, you got to start folks on committees and then put them through this board orientation program that we've just started a pilot, plus buddy them up in the organization.
Yeah, it's all, you know, that can work, I guess, for certain people. I'm thinking maybe some of the harder to reach people, maybe they're working, you know, 2 or 3 jobs and they've got kids and they don't have maybe an internet, stable internet access, or they don't have transportation, or like if you're really, you know, looking for folks who probably have used your services, there's a lot of obstacles. Like they don't have the freedom at lunch to like sit on a Zoom like this, you know. I guess that's what I'm thinking. Some of them may be really harder to reach, but the ones who can give the most valuable input because they've been there and a lot of us haven't.
I'm going to ask Chris Keller for her experiences that way. Chris, are you still here? Can you hear that?
You rascal.
I couldn't help it. You are the fount of experience here. Come on, Rascal.
Oh, it's really, really tough. And if you get too few people with lived life experiences, then they get discouraged that they aren't professional enough or qualified enough. So you really have to work hard on having, you know, like we talked earlier, of not just checking a box, but having several people in that particularly vulnerable category. And we've talked about, even with young people, you know, we've done 1 or 2 under 40 and get all excited and they cycle off in 18 months, or a promotion, they haven't connected with a board member, they're having a baby, you know, whatever it is, there's always something. Okay. So I think the biggest thing for us has been to be really conscious, and we can always tell when we haven't been really conscious because that's when we lose somebody. So it's live life experiences, minority, smaller voices on the board. They can't be the only one. They have to have peers on the board, which means you've got a bigger board. And then you get a funder that calls up and says, you know, you're going to go do this. We need 100% financial support, right, all of your board members. And, you know, that's not how we roll. We've got to go and explain that the right variety of voices adds more value to the organization than the dollars that might come from somebody that of means. So it's hard work. Thank you for exposing our not yet successful, but working at it.
Okay, well, thank you, because this is where I'm trying to go with my board, and, you know, reading about it, it's so daunting, you almost don't want to even try, because I'm seeing all the pitfalls and how hard it is. Which doesn't mean I have no reason not to do it, but it's just, I, you know, thought it would be easier, and like everything is, I guess, until you really research it.
Well, Yolanda, I think, Chris Keller, do you know Connie Carter?
Sorry,
You know a woman named Connie Carter?
you betcha.
And Yolanda, do you know a woman named Connie
Yeah,
Carter?
absolutely.
Okay, make sure that Connie Carter hooks the two of you up for additional conversations.
Okay,
Because Connie Carter knows where Chris is and Yolanda. So
Yeah.
Connie's one of our consultants who is really good at hooking people up, and there's some lived experience here.
And
Good.
Connie and I've talked about this a lot, and one of the issues is we need more consultants that aren't white.
Yeah, we do.
So we really need to go in and spend the time to get people that represent the different voices being part of the consulting team. So it's hard, and Connie and I talk about it, so.
The pace of change can be glacial, but at least we're headed in the right direction. Now, I realize it's only a couple minutes to 1 o'clock, and we said we would do this roundtable or this workshop for an hour. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Burning questions, comments, observations? This is the start of a long process, but it's a fruitful one, but it's got to be well tended.
Happy National Volunteer Week.
There we go. Lynn, I'm glad you chime in from your Philly vantage point with this. It's helpful. Thank you. If you want to follow up individually, you have our contact information. And as I said, we'll send an email out with the handout and survey links if there's anything we can do. You're doing amazing things in the community, and we are trying to make it even easier, or not, if not easy, at least more options out there. As we look ahead, we do have more Zoom sessions coming up. What do we got? So next month will be the finance part, what donors look for, nonprofit financials for the board training. And then we'll do the self-assessment for the board and assessing the CEO. And our roundtables meet all. So these are all on our website. And plus we have some good community conversations coming up. This week we're dealing with environmental justice. Next month is healthcare, especially being born Black is the subtitle. And then we have to really say why Juneteenth in June. So we hope that you'll spread the word and come on for some interesting lunchtime food for thoughts. So thank you for everything you're doing. And I know it's a lot, so please don't hesitate to get in touch. And congratulations on doing the best you can today with all the energy you have.
Thank you.